Well, it's been an honor to be here all week, and I want to finish up our final story talking about Peter, and I want to look at one last moment in his life to close out this week. This is what I want to ask, real important question. I'm not going to define it because then we get all kind of answers in here, but raise your hand if you are currently right now dating someone. However you define that. If you're currently dating someone, raise your hand. Wow, actually less people than I thought. Nice. And I see some people like looking across the room like, are they claiming me or are they not? Maybe I should put my hand. Okay, I'm going to put it down. He doesn't have his hand up, so I'm not raising mine. Great start. So today I want to talk about love. Yeah, today I want to talk about love. What are our age ranges in here?
4 years old to 18.
All the way up to 18. And the youngest is what, 14? 12. Okay, well, cool. Well, good ages. Who is not allowed to date? You know from your parents, you are absolutely not allowed to date right now. Yeah. Parents. Winning. The parents are winning. You say, why are you starting off with dating? Well, here's the thing. Love is such an interesting concept. One I've always been drawn toward and fascinated with. I had a little nephew who was 3 years old, and he was watching a Disney movie. I'm actually not sure what movie he was watching. And my sister got cracked up and started videoing him because he just began to bawl watching this movie. And it wasn't like a sad part. It's like, it's Disney. They're like falling in love, happy ever after. Like some Prince Charming and some one of the princesses. And, my little nephew, 3 years old, is just sobbing. And so Lindsay looked at him and said, Bud, what's wrong? And he said, it's my heart. 3 years old. He gets it, dude. He just totally moved by love. That's what Disney wants you to be. They train you since you're a toddler before you can talk, how to love, and they do a good job of it. They actually twist all the stories. If you want to go back and actually read the fairy tale stories that Walt Disney recreated, they are awful. I mean, like crazy and scary and really twisted and stuff children would never be allowed to hear and learn. And Walt Disney was like, wow, I'm really going to clean these up and make them just a simple love story and make the world fall in love with love. You know, it's something the whole world is fascinated with. And Hollywood, in every movie, it's like you can be in the middle of like a thriller or in the middle of a war movie or in the middle of a scary movie, and all of a sudden there's a love story that pops up. It's like, I don't actually think this fits the genre of movie that you're going for here. Like, there are zombies, but they're in love. Like, vampires became like a world love phenomenon. I don't exactly get it. I don't think it works with genres of movies. But it's something the whole world's fascinated with. How to tell a good love story, how to find a good love story, how to live a good love story. And I'm telling you, I am a hopeless, and I'm not afraid to admit it, I am a hopeless romantic. I mean, absolutely hopeless romantic. My first date, my parents said you're not allowed to date till you're married or something like that. And then 15 years old, I like come to him and I beg him. I'm like, please, she's beautiful and I'm gonna lose her if I don't date her now. And we're 15 and my dad's like, you just got your permit. You can't go like driving her around town. So he said, you come up with a plan, submit it to your mom and I, we'll talk about it. And then this was like full submittal process and you have to get an approval and it's crazy. And then you have to go talk to her parents and get their approval. And then if both parents agree, you can go out on your first date. And so we did. 15 years old. Thank you. That was also my last date. No, I'm just kidding. 15 years old. Guys, listen to me. I'm a hopeless romantic. I planned well. I want you to know how well I planned. My parents had just bought a piece of property on the water and were planning to build a house there. And there was a nice hillside that overlooks the Chesapeake Bay on the back of the property. My parents had also just bought jet skis And so I decided for our first date, our parents are going to have to drive us and drop us off wherever we're going. And I knew they'd probably stay around and snoop. And so I said, for our first date, I want to go, Dad, to this land that you just purchased because you love the land and I love the land and everybody loves the land. And she's going to love the land. And so we're going to go out and I want to put one jet ski in. I'm trying to teach you something. I want to put one jet ski in, not two. We had two. I just want to put one in the water. And so, Dad, if you'll just go down and put a jet ski in the water while you're bringing the jet ski to the property, I'm going to have a picnic on the hillside at sunset. This is a pretty good plan, guys. So my parents, thank you. My parents agreed under one condition. They had to be there. So they said, we don't have to be up in your area. You know, we have multiple acres, and I need to go work on the property anyways. And so I'll work on the property. Y'all can sit on the hillside where I can see you, and you can have a picnic. And then y'all can take the jet ski out on the bay for a few minutes, and where we can see you. And then you can come back, and I'll approve that. So mustered up all this courage, went and presented the plan to her dad, and he said yes. Mainly because my dad's a preacher and he was going to be there the whole time. And so 15 years old, we get in the car with my parents, we go over there, everything was working. I cannot even explain to you how well this went. Like even better than I expected it. I had my mom pack the picnic, I'm just being honest, because I can't make anything. Like literally have caught Easy Mac on fire. And so not a chance I was making this stuff. And so my mom, made a picnic for us. And they knew this girl and her family really well. And so we get out to the property, they go working on whatever they're working on the property, we sit down, we have a picnic. We were already great friends. We had known each other for years, and so it was a blast. And right as the sun is getting ready to set, I'm talking we got a good 15 minutes left. I'm like, jet ski time. We jump on the jet ski, we ride out in the bay, she's laughing, she's having fun, I'm acting like I'm gonna throw her off. I didn't. My parents are standing on the shore like this. And I'm like, wow, they are right there, aren't they? So we're having fun, and I decide, sunset, water, we ought to just, I'm not gonna throw her off, but we ought to jump in and swim a little bit. And it'll be like the perfect ending. You jump in the water, you swim around, you come back to the shore, perfect sunset, hopeless romantic. So I jump in. I don't know why. I'm like, I'm going to jump in. And after I jump in, you jump to me. She's like, cool, sweet. Like she couldn't swim. She could swim. So I jump in, and what no one told me is that we had just gotten property on the water, so we didn't really understand kind of what happens throughout the year. There's a jellyfish migration, guys. And this jellyfish migration happens usually every year. They don't know the exact time, but they put out warnings like, hey, for the next 48 hours, the jellyfish are going to be insane in the bay. And so we don't recommend. I mean, anybody know what I'm talking about? Yeah. Okay. I jump in, guys. Into what seemed like or felt like thousands of jellyfish. And the moment I hit the water, there's no maintaining stud status, no keeping your composure. I flip because they are swarmed around me. And the only thing I knew was to try and get back up on the jet ski. So the jet ski has a running board. I swam over and I threw both arms over the running board. But they were stinging me so bad, I was shaking and I could not pull myself back up on the jet ski. By this time, she is laughing so hard that she is literally crying. I'm talking, she is sitting sideways on the seat, hunched over, dying laughing. And I am on the running board, just shaking, screaming, flailing. It is the most unattractive moment. She is a great volleyball player and she played for LU and was a state champion volleyball player. And So she reaches down in the water. This is really what you want to happen on a date. And picks me up out of the water. She wasn't like a big girl. She was just very stout and strong. And so she pulled me out of the water. I'm not making this up. They were still wrapped around my arms and legs. And then her laughing was like, oh gosh. And she started pulling jellyfish off of me. Okay? We ride back in, and I'm like, I'm not gonna cry. I am not gonna cry. But if I get back to the shore and they don't have something to put on me, I might cry. So she's still trying not to laugh. It was hysterical. She probably still laughs about it to this day. I checked online this morning so that y'all would know how the love story ended. She is in labor right now with a great friend of mine's baby. They're married. And that's how that love story ended. We're still great friends to this day. I'm still great friends with her husband. And he's a pastor, and they have a great marriage, and they're having babies. Isn't that great? And so that's how that love story ended. No, but we actually did end up dating for the next, I guess, until I graduated high school, and we're the best of friends, went to college at the same place. But that was my first date story. Absolute hopeless romantic. That did not change when I got to LU. I would go out on dates and plan just the most extravagant, ridiculous dates. Sometimes on my dad's credit card. One time, this is a true story, he called me and said, can you explain to me why there's over $200 taken off my credit card? And I said, remember that place you took Mom for y'all's anniversary, like their 25th anniversary? I took somebody there on our first date. He was like, Daniel, this is not how this works. It's not even your money. Anyways, hopeless romantic. And yes. At LU, if you go to LU, you're going to learn something really fast. Everybody wants a ring by spring. Have you ever heard of this? This is an actual world phenomenon where freshman girls think it's appropriate or a good idea to get married or to get engaged your freshman year of college. And almost every date that I went on, within like a date, I mean literally, y'all think I'm making this up, but I'm serious. I would get scared off so quick because within one date, girls would want to have what was called then in 2011, I don't know what you call it today, a DTR. Anybody know what I'm talking about? A DTR. Define the relationship. Exactly. I hear the groaning. So as a freshman in college, as a junior in college, as a senior in college, I would go out on these first dates. And I mean, we'd be like 2 dates in, and she'd be like, so what's happening here? I'd be like, I don't know. True story. If you happen to watch this on YouTube, I apologize. I will not say your name. I went out on one particular date, and I know she probably didn't mean anything by it, but she turned around, and at the time I was driving a white Sonata, and she turned around and she said, this car is like perfect for kids in the back seat. Don't wonder why I'm not married. These people are crazy out here. Crazy. That's literally what she said. This car is like perfect for kids. I was like, not completing this date, not going through with it, not going through. Get back to campus. We went to we went to fast food and went back to the campus. I was afraid that the date would go well. That one we intentionally tanked. I say all that to say, these define the relationship conversations were these moments where you were supposed to kind of clarify what was going on in the relationship. By the way, guys, that's your job. A girl should never be guessing what's happening in a relationship because you should always be that clear and that up front. And so we would have these define the relationship talks that came way too soon, that would have babies mentioned or marriage mentioned, that would scare me away really, really quickly. I would submit to you today that you need a DTR with God. You need a moment where you clarify, define your relationship with Jesus. And that's the exact thing that happens here with Peter in the last passage that I want us to look at, specifically concerning his life. We're in John chapter 21, starting in verse 15. John chapter 21, starting in verse 15, this is what it says. When they had finished breakfast, Jesus said to Simon Peter, Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? And he said, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. And he said to him, feed my lambs. And he said to him a second time, Simon, son of John, do you love me? And he said, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. And he said, then tend my sheep. And he said to him a third time, Simon, son of John, do you love me? And he said, Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you. And Jesus said, feed my sheep. Verse 18, truly, I say to you, when you were young, you used to dress yourself and walk wherever you wanted. But when you are old, you will stretch out your hands, and another will dress you and carry you where you do not want to go. John tells us in parentheses, this he said to show what kind of death he was to glorify God in. And after saying this, he said to him, follow me. Follow me. Do you love me? It's not a question you want from an 18-year-old freshman in college, but it is a question that you need to hear from Jesus. And it is a question that Jesus uses to restore Peter after he's failed. Yesterday, we took a look at Jesus predicting that Peter would fail. We skipped over the failure of Peter. The main reason why is because I wanted you to just learn from Jesus' prediction rather than get so hung up on all the specifics of how Peter failed. And today I want to look at how Peter was restored. This one moment between Jesus and Peter will completely change the rest of Peter's life, and it is the ultimate moment of defining where he stands with Jesus. There's a few things I want you to see. The first thing I want you to see is it's a familiar start to the passage. What I didn't read to you is a story that would sound like I read it on the first day, but it's actually a story that happened again. See, in verse 3, Simon Peter said, I'm going fishing, which is ironic because he hasn't been fishing the whole time he's been with Jesus. Because he had a new calling on his life. And all of a sudden, we start this chapter after Jesus has died and after he's risen again. And he says, hey, I'm going fishing. And the disciples said, we'll go with you. And they went out in a boat and they caught nothing. Is this sounding familiar? And then Jesus said, he shows up and he says, children, do you have any fish? And they answered, no. They don't know it's Jesus yet. And he said, cast the net on the other side of the boat and you will find some. So they did it, and they were not able to haul all the fish in because the quantity of fish. And then the disciple who Jesus loved, that's John, said to Peter, it's the Lord. And when Simon Peter heard it was the Lord, he put on his outer garment, threw himself into the sea, and swam back to the shore. Wow. So he jumps in and swims back to the shore to meet Jesus. Now here's what's funny. Almost every part of everything I just read, you've already heard in one of the sermons. So, Peter's fishing. That's where he started. They caught nothing. That was the first day. Jesus calls out and says, throw the net on the other side. They don't know it's Jesus, like in the storm. They do it. They're hauling in all these fish, just like when Peter first met him. And then, when he realizes it's the Lord's, he jumps out of the boat. But this time, he's not walking. He's swimming. See, so many things that are familiar to the other stories, and yet, in this story, there's clear marks that are different from the other stories. And it's clear that even though Peter is still drawn to Jesus, even though Peter is still, I would say, even in love with Jesus, even though Peter still trusts and knows Jesus, something is different. And that something is that he's failed. So Jesus takes him back to a familiar start. But not just a familiar start. Jesus takes them back to a familiar setting. In verse 9, it says, when they came to shore, they saw a charcoal fire. When they came to shore, they saw a charcoal fire. Jesus said, hey, throw the fish on the fire and let's eat breakfast. Which is my biblical argument for why you should eat meat, but it's beside the point, okay? The reason that charcoal fire is important is because in Luke 22:15, Peter is sitting by a fire in a courtyard. Literally, it says he sat by a kindled fire in the courtyard, and that is the moment where Peter denies Jesus 3 times. And so it's a familiar start that Peter knew, and a familiar setting that Peter had been at. Not only was this the moment where, much like where Jesus had called him, this was also the moment much like when Peter had failed. And so Peter is sitting around this campfire once again, and Jesus gives him a familiar repetition. It's a familiar start. It's a familiar setting, but I'm telling you, it's familiar repetition. See, Jesus said to him 3 times, "Do you love me?" He says, "Yes, I love you." Jesus says, No, Peter, do you love me?" And he says, "Yes, Lord, I love you." And he says, "Peter, do you love me?" And this is what Scripture records. Peter was grieved because he had said to him a 3rd time, "Do you love me?" Now listen, Peter was grieved because he had said to him a 3rd time, "Do you love me?" And listen to Peter's response. "Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you." You say, why is that important? Because the last time in Peter's life that something had happened back-to-back 3 times, he had received another question. "Do you know this man?" "No, I don't know him." "Do you know this man?" "No, I don't know him." "Do you know this man?" "I say, no, I don't know him." At that moment, Jesus, as he's being beaten and spat on and ridiculed, turns and looks at Peter. And so Peter and Jesus are back around the fire again, and Jesus asks him 3 times, and he realizes at the 3rd time that Jesus is doing something. He's giving him a chance to affirm that he loves him for every time that he's denied him. And all of a sudden, all this grief comes into Peter's heart when he hears it a 3rd time. And his response, listen to it. "Jesus, you know everything. You know everything." I wonder if all the disciples who were sitting there knew what Peter had done. I wonder. I don't know if they knew, but Jesus knew and Peter knew that. And so Peter says to Jesus, "Lord, you know everything. You know how I failed you. You know how I messed up. You know how I've denied you. You know how I've walked away from you. You know that while other people like John were at the foot of the cross, I wasn't there. Jesus, you know everything." But then he follows it with a simple statement. "And because you know everything, you know I love you." Students, the worst failures of my life, I'm ashamed to tell you, came after I started following Jesus. After I started following Jesus. Because even though I finally realized who Jesus was, and even though I finally started trusting the truth of the gospel, I still didn't understand how to walk with him day in and day out. And because of that, I was just completely bound in my sin still. And this is what's important. The way I knew that I was saved, I've had students ask me that before. If you were walking in sin, how'd you know I was saved? I was never convicted about sin before, and all of a sudden I was miserable in my sin. Now, I had been doing the same things before I was saved, but now Jesus had given me a realization of the gospel, and I was miserable in my own sin. And I just could not figure out how to overcome it, and I was learning how to walk with Jesus. And so I understand what Peter feels here when he realizes that he failed the Lord, but he realizes that the Lord also knew that deep in his heart there was still a great love for Jesus. I'm going to tell you something I didn't plan on saying. I got out of high school. I saw a lot of freedom from sin sophomore year. Wow, I've never shared this publicly. This will be fun. I had seen almost all of my freedom from sin sophomore year of high school. So much freedom, in fact, that I started leading freedom groups for high school guys and looking to overcome different sins. And in the process of doing that, I did that from sophomore year to senior year. Countless friends and people I had even never met. I got to walk on the journey with freedom, and it was so restoring and so filling and so empowering. My senior year, I got a call from a group at Liberty University, and they offered to pay for my school if I would travel with them doing ministry, and I took that job. And I traveled nonstop for the first 3 years of my college experience. What most people do not know is that I resigned my third year of college the summer after my third year of college, and was asked not to return to Liberty University. In the course of traveling, I had fallen back into sin. And I did not know how to tell people because I was the face that so many people had followed to freedom. And so how do you tell people that you've fallen when you were the person that was leading them? And I rationalized, by the way, this was the enemy. I rationalized in my mind that since I was this great Christian guy who had helped them find freedom from sin, that if they ever knew that I fell again, that they would feel like fighting sin was hopeless for them. And so I rationalized hiding my sin by thinking back on how God had used me to free others. And that was all the enemy, all of it. And when Scripture says, be sure your sin will find you out, it didn't accidentally, he didn't actually accidentally put that in the Bible. And I actually was still fasting every week to do ministry. You want to talk about a miserable life. Go to junior year of my college career, and I was really struggling with sin, and I was fasting every single week for the weekends that would come ahead for ministry. Now that is confusing. I'm starving, I'm struggling, and I'm still doing ministry. And I just could not tell people what I was struggling with. And on that particular week, I fasted through the week, and that fast lasted 10 days on water. You say, why? Usually I would fast in the morning, like a Monday morning, I mean at the beginning of the week, and fast like a Monday. And then the rest of the week I wouldn't fast. But on that particular week, I started fasting that Monday morning, and I was so miserable with myself and with my own sin that I ended up just fasting through the week and then into the next week. At the end of that 10-day fast, the freedom that God gave me, I was praying in my closet one morning, and I literally prayed as I was just with him that morning, God, if this is the rest of my life, I cannot do it. You say, were you suicidal? No. Depressed, confused, frustrated. But I just told the Lord, hey, if this is forever, if I'm going to do ministry and struggle with sin and never find freedom, I can't fake it forever. And so I can't do it. And God just overwhelmingly met me that morning in my closet and spoke to me and said, I'm going to free you. That freedom came when I was in Texas, and I got a call from my boss. And he said, hey, I need you to fly back. I was doing ministry out there. In fact, the night before, I had led on a stage where there's 15,000 people there that night. Not a small ministry. And I knew as soon as I heard his voice, he knows. And I said, sir, I don't need to fly back. I'll resign immediately. And I resigned over the phone, came back and signed that resignation letter. You say, why do you tell me all that? Because there is a misery that comes when you know you're supposed to be doing something for the Lord, but you've fallen and you've failed. And there is a grace that comes when you encounter Jesus face to face and he restores you. You'd think that'd be one of the worst moments of my life. I got a huge ministry taken away from me, and now that's been 6-7 years ago. And I got a kind of a black eye in our celebrity community at LU. And people said what they wanted to say and talked what they wanted to talk. And you think that would be an awful moment for me? It was one of the best moments of my life. Because it was God confirming that he was still there. And my ministry was not going to be over. And I was not going to have to live a life of hypocrisy for the rest of my life. And so I lost that ministry to gain intimacy with Jesus that I'd never had before. And to gain a fresh new start. And I went back to school with my head held high. Why? Because Jesus knew I loved him, and I knew it wasn't over. You say, how'd you know it wasn't over? Some of you have listened to my album. There's a song on that album. I was driving in the car on the way back from Texas. That's a long drive alone, by the way, 22 hours. I was driving in my car alone, and a friend texted me one verse. He said, I don't know why I'm texting you this. It wasn't out yet. The news wasn't out. And he said, I don't know why I'm texting you this, but I just feel like I was supposed to send you this verse. I just read it out of the book of Micah. This is what the verse was. You will not rejoice over me, my enemy. For though I fall, yet I will rise. The Lord will be a light unto me. I will bear the indignation of the Lord because I've greatly sinned against him. But he will vindicate. I'm telling you, I picked up my phone and I read that text. I sung that same sonata that I had gone on the date with that was good for children in the back seat. I sung that sonata onto the side of the interstate, and I began to repeat that verse out loud. You will not rejoice over me, my enemy, for though I fall, yet I will rise. The Lord will be a light unto me. I will bear the indignation of the Lord because I've sinned against him, but he will vindicate my cause. I just began to repeat that over and over and over, out loud. And I knew I had to make this album years later because to me it was a declaration. Every time you play it in the car, the enemy can hear it, and it's a reminder that he did not win in my life. And he just hears that verse repeated over and over in those melodies. And this is why I bring all that to your attention. I feel like I so know this moment with Peter. And yes, it's a moment of shame, but I'm telling you, it is a moment of glory. Because when the Lord asks you over and over, do you love me? Do you love me? Do you love me? And you get a chance to respond back for every time you've failed, you realize what the Word says when it says, he will restore what the enemy has taken. And every time that Peter responded with, I love you, he said, feed my sheep or feed my lamb. Literally, all he was saying is, Peter, your job remains. Peter, I'm going to restore you. Peter, you still have a ministry and a work to do. Stop fishing and go back out there and reach men. It was the exact thing that Jesus had prophesied would happen when he said, when you return, go strengthen your brothers. Isn't that what we read yesterday? And now right here he's saying, go feed my sheep or go tend to my lambs. And every time Peter responds back with such a simple phrase, I love you, I love you, you know that I love you. And so I just want to end this spiritual emphasis week by asking you, do you love Jesus? Do you love Jesus? You say, Dana, I think I love him. No, I'm talking about, do you love him in a way that it transforms what you do and the way you act toward him? I'm talking, do you love him in such a way where you live for him? Do you love him in such a way where it's an overflow? I'm telling you, in a culture that's obsessed with love between relationships, I'm telling you, do you love Jesus the way you stalk and go after and date and pursue girls and guys? I'm talking, do you really love Jesus? Listen to the word of God. 1 John chapter 4, verse 9 says, in this the love of God was made clear to us, that God sent his only Son into the world so that we might live through him. And this is love. Not that we have loved God, but that he loved us and sent his Son to be a propitiation, literally a gift to the turning away of wrath. To be the gift to the turning away of wrath for our sins. He goes on to say in verse 19 of that passage, we love because he first loved us. I think about the moment when these Pharisees try to trip up Jesus. And in Matthew chapter 22, they said, teacher, what's the greatest commandment? And Jesus said, love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. And the second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. For all the law of the prophets hang on these two commandments. Only problem, those two commandments can't be found anywhere in the law of the Old Testament. And yet Jesus knew if you just have this one thing right, everything else falls in line. See, if you just have this one thing right in your life, if you just love him, everything else finds its place. Love God. Students, do you have a love for God? started with relationships because I think it's something that maybe you understand even at your young age in pursuit of someone that you might one day love. And so I'm telling you, sometimes there's a seeming quote-unquote love at first sight. I mean, you see somebody and it's just like, oh my goodness, they're incredible. I think I love them. Miss Lori thought that was really funny. Other times, it's a process. It's like you start getting to know somebody and you really start, quote unquote, falling for them. I'm not even saying that that's real love. What I'm saying is that in that, we actually see something that'll teach us how to walk with Jesus. I want you to imagine something with me, if you will. And I love this. It's an illustration by John Piper. I think it's so brilliant. Imagine with me, if you will, if one day, if God allows me to get married, I come home. And on my way home, I stop and I get a bouquet of flowers. I'm talking like maybe a dozen roses or something. And I run in the house. And I see my wife there. And I show her the roses. And I say, these are for you. Imagine with me if she looks back and she's like, babe, why did you do this for me? And I say, I read it in a book. No, seriously, I went to Barnes & Noble's. I picked up a book, and it was a book on like marriage. And I picked it up, and it said, all good husbands get their wives flowers. And so on the way home, I thought, oh, flowers are expensive, and I don't like flowers. I don't think they smell good, and I have horrible allergies. But the book said to do it, so I'm going to just pick these up. So I went by a place, and I picked up these flowers, and I brought them to you. How do you think she's going to respond to that? She's going to slap me, hopefully not. I would never do that. And listen, my wife would never be honored by that. But that's the way that you approach Jesus. You told me to do it. I don't like to read the Bible, but that's what you asked me to do, so I'm doing it. I read it and I got nothing out of it. In fact, I don't like this at all, but you like when I do it. Doesn't that sound crazy? And this is the way most of us walk with Jesus. Let's go back to the illustration. What if one day I walked in and I pulled out those flowers and she said, babe, why did you do this for me? And I said, the entire day I could have stopped thinking about you. I'm talking all day, you were just on my mind. And I wanted to be with you. And on the way home I stopped because you asked me to get bread. And I stopped and I saw these roses and I'm like, I'm getting the roses. I don't care how much they cost and we have no money. I just wanted to get you roses because I'm crazy about you. I love you. And this is like the only tangible way. I just need to show you that. I love you. Girls, how do you think she's going to respond to that? Listen to me. It's a silly illustration with a profound point. God is not honored when you do something for Him because you think you have to. And God is not honored when you do all these things because you feel like you're forced to. And God doesn't find pleasure when you sit down and you do all these religious works in order to try to please Him. God finds pleasure in you when you find great pleasure in Him. And that's why His question to Peter is not, Peter, what are you doing next? Peter, you know I'm about to leave and you've got to lead all these disciples. Peter, I need you to step up and I need you to forget about what you did because I've already forgiven you. And I just need you to move on and start doing what I've asked you to do. Now, Peter, I'm going to need you to go tend my sheep and I'm going to need you to go feed them. And so strengthen your brothers. No, that's not what he says. He says, Peter, you still love me? Why? Because everything natural that we do for God is not in order to save us, but it's a response to the fact that we've already been saved. And everything that we do for Him is an outpouring of our great love for Him. It's not burdensome to follow Jesus, it's a joy. It's not burdensome to spend time with Him, it's a pleasure. It's not hard in order to tell people about Him because you can't stop thinking about Him. It's not hard to go do things on his behalf because you love him so much. And so students, I ask you, do you love Jesus? Not do you know the stories of the Bible? Not do you get up and do all these things for him? Not do you go to a Christian school or have a Christian home or sometimes read your Bible or you're a leader in your youth group or you lead the prayer team or you sing on the praise team or any of these things. I'm asking, do you love him? I'm talking, do you love him where you get chills when you think about what he's done for you? Do you love him the way that you get excited when you meet a new girl or a new guy that you just can't stop thinking about? Do you love him in that you stalk him on social media? I don't think that one exactly translates, but do you love him where you pursue him? Do you love him where you go after him? Do you love him where all of the natural actions that even in a humanistic, earthly standpoint we think of when we think of love, do you love him like that? Do you love him where it leads you to show it in action? Students, I don't want you to go home and do all this spiritual stuff because you think you have to. And I don't want you to live the rest of your life working for some job or some ministry or some thing because you think that's just what God's called you to. I want you to love Jesus. And consequently, I want everything that happens in your life to just flow out of a love for him. Because when you really love someone, it's obvious. It's evident. It's natural. It's easy. It's fun. It's joy-filled. It's great. And you just want to be around them. It's like weird to everybody else, but you just want to be with them. And you just want to spend time with them. Peter, do you love me? Yes. Jesus, I love you. Feed my sheep. Peter, do you love me? Yes. Jesus, I love you. Tend to my lambs. Peter, look at me. Peter, do you love me? God, you know everything. And you know I love you. Good, Peter. And go do what I've called you to do. In fact, Peter, from here on out, I'm not going to be here, but we're still going to walk together. You're not going to be able to see me, but you're still going to hear my voice. And from here on out, honestly, it's going to get real hard. Because when you were a little kid, you just could run wherever you wanted and dress yourself. Peter, people have really liked you. In fact, they've loved you. And it's been easy. But there's going to come a day where the people around here don't love you anymore. And Peter, actually, they're going to hate you. And they're going to beat you and they're going to throw you in prison. They're going to strip you of your robes. And Peter, they're even going to kill you. See, one day when you were a kid, you went wherever you wanted, did whatever you wanted. But when you're old, they're going to drag you around this city. You're going to have no say of your own life. But you're still going to have me. And that love for me, Peter, it's going to be what carries you to the very end. And even when they hate you and they kill you, the moment you close your eyes in this life, you'll be again with the one you love. I'm glad that you love me. Go do what I've called you to do. Do you get it? See, these aren't just words on a page. They're a reality in people's lives. And Peter is human just like you and me. But he has to come face to face and really define a simple thing. Do I love Jesus? He does. And because he does, everything for the rest of his life will flow naturally. It'll just flow. Because he's working and waiting and serving somebody he loves? And it's a question I have to answer. Do I love Jesus? It's a question you have to answer. Do you love Jesus? One day it's not always going to be as easy to love him as it is here. But in that day, even then, your love for him will sustain you. God, the best I know how, I've tried to take a very real, very human character, and I've tried to just bring him to life for these students all week and help them see how Peter's really a lot like them. He's a lot like me. And he went through what we go through and struggled with what we struggled with. And in the end, God, he just had a love for you that carried him to the end. And so, God, leaving, that is really the question that I want all of us to wrestle with. And so will you just burn that in our hearts and minds? Do you love me? Do you love me? And God, I pray that we'll be able to continually answer back like Peter did. Lord, you know that I love you. You know everything, and you know that I love you. And God, I want my love for you to be so real and so tangible that I'll pursue you above everything else. I want a love for you that other people are attracted to, drawn to. God, make our love for you real. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Guys, thank you so much for letting me be here this week. Seriously, publicly, I want to thank the administration. You have a great school, students. And above all else, I want you to learn to love Jesus. I hope everything I've talked about this week, you can turn into a reality in your life. And I hope that Jesus does in your life what he did in Peter's. Real stories, real people. And God is still doing it today, even in me. So, love you guys. I hope you'll have a great week. Thank God for being here.
Daniel, thank you for coming, and you are more of a blessing to us, I hope, than we are to you. But this has been a phenomenal week, and we just want to let Daniel know that. The chicken buckets that we have the money in, I'm going to keep those around for a day, because I know some of you were not prepared today to give some money for Daniel. But if you would like to do that tomorrow, let us know, because we want to show him how much we love it. Guys, I always like to end Spiritual Limbs this week with just one thought. And that is that this is really not the end of Spiritual Limbs this week. It can continue, and it should continue, and we want it to continue. So pray for each other and hold each other accountable. Like Daniel said, this is a fantastic school. This is God's school. This is your school. And if you want it to be special, you're the ones that have to keep it special and make it special. So hold each other accountable. Be there for that friend that's hurting, and pray for that friend. All right, thank you guys. Love you.